kids with eggs taped to them. I said this last week, but I ate too much food, like in the morning. But the service itself was just incredible. We got to see life change. We got to see God move in people's hearts and lives. And so it was an amazing service. It was so great to be a part of. And I want to thank you guys for being there and all the effort that all of you put into making that service be what it was. It was fantastic. We had like over 130 people here, actually over 140 with kids and all that, like on our campus. That's a lot of people, you guys. So that's amazing. We can clap for that. And it's a reminder to me that that's the amount of people that want to come on a Sunday, right? There is so much more room for growth. And so I just want to encourage you. There are people in your lives to invite, right? People who are just waiting for you to say, hey, do you want to come to church? And like, they might actually say yes, because some of them did this Sunday, and hopefully that bolstered your faith and brought you back to say, all right, God's got more for people. So Easter was amazing. And today, as we're diving into the message, we're actually going back to the book of Galatians. So if you were here with us before Easter, we were going through the book of Galatians quite a while. And then today, we took a couple breaks off. We did Palm Sunday, we had Easter. And today, it seems like a total disconnect from Easter. But what we're going to see today is that the resurrection that we talked about, the resurrection power that raised Jesus from the dead, is the same power that we have inside of ourselves. And it's called the Holy Spirit. You see, when Jesus went back up to heaven, he gave us the Holy Spirit, which is our helper. And so today we're actually going to be looking at this idea of what does the Holy Spirit do and how do we actually walk and live in the Spirit? Because I don't know about you, this is not maybe the best time to talk about it, but New Year's resolutions, have any of you made it through your are you still doing well on your resolutions? What, none of you? Come on, okay, I hear it, woo, over here, great. One of you, well done. Michelle and I, we've talked about this before, but we don't even make goals or resolutions. We make more of kind of like hopes and dreams. We're like, yeah, it would be great if, it'd be great if we could kind of get healthier this year, or maybe, to have a little bit more emotional stability or do more dates or whatever. But goals for us are really hard, particularly because I don't like when I miss a goal. Right? I don't know about you, but I don't like setting a goal and then not actually accomplishing that goal. So I'm like, well, the easiest solution to that is what? I just won't set a goal. That just makes it so much easier, right? If I don't set a goal, then I'm not going to miss the goal. But honestly, I want to do better. I want to become healthier, more spiritual. I want to grow in love and good deeds and kindness, and I want to be healthy. All of those things I want. But then I find that I have a hard time following through. Do you guys ever experience that? None of you, well, very few of you, it sounds like, have made your goals yet, so good job. We were working on it together. I'm in good company, which is good. But there's lots of practical ways, right, where we put in place to say, all right, how do I make these goals come about? Lots of practical ways to meet these goals, right, through boundaries or through dedication or having a calendar or maybe an accountability with people. You're like, hey, can you help me reach this goal? But for all of these ways, it's still on our own willpower to accomplish a goal, isn't it? Right? It's like if I want to run more and get healthier, I need to actually get up in the morning and put my shoes on and go running. I can't just be like, I hope I get healthier. It's like, no, I got to actually go do it. There's a sense of willpower that I need in my life. And when it comes to not just external goals, but internal goals, like who I want to become, I find that it is really hard to become who I want to be on my own. I keep trying and trying and trying and failing and failing and failing. And I keep asking myself, maybe you're asking yourself the same question, is why can't I become everything that I want to be? Right? Why can't I become fully that fully formed Christian person that's like, I'm living life, I have victory in every area of my life, everything is going incredible and amazing. Maybe some of you today, you've discovered that, and congratulations. I'm so happy for you. But I find in my own life the tension between I want to be, but I don't always want to do. Right? I want to be godly, but I don't always want to actually follow through or even know how to follow through. It's kind of this dilemma. And so as we dive back into Galatians today, Paul actually talks about this dilemma. He talks about what do you do when you want to live a life of freedom, but you don't actually know how to follow through with that. And this is actually going to be the main point of our passage today and all of Galatians is this, that life by the Spirit, it actually brings freedom and love. See, I want to live a life of freedom and love. Not a freedom just to do whatever I want, but freedom to love other people, to live the best version of myself for the benefit of the world. And I think all of you would say the same. You want that for yourselves, for your lives. But the thing is, it's a battle. And it's a battle, as Paul's going to talk about today, between two things. You have the flesh on one side, and you have the Spirit on the other. And as we go through this, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I totally understand this battle between the flesh and the Spirit. But in case you don't understand battle lines, think about your favorite battle scene in a movie. You guys have that in your head? Maybe some of you hate battle scenes, and you're like, this is a terrible analogy. My favorite battle scene is in Braveheart. You guys know what I'm talking about. If you've seen Braveheart, you know it's the time William Wallace is on his horse and he's like, "Sons of Scotland." The accent stops there, but he does this rousing speech and it's all like good. And on one side you've got the Sons of Freedom, the Scottish. It's like, yeah, freedom. And over here you've got like the flesh, which is the English. Oh, boo, we don't like the English. And it makes it so simple. The good guys are the Scottish people. The bad guys are the English people. Now, if you're a Scottish-English mix, I'm so sorry, but you'll actually understand this analogy even better because this is not how real life works inside of our hearts. We do not have a good side, and then I'm choosing the good side, so therefore I'm not on the bad side. What I find inside myself is there are two battle lines, and I'm the guy in the middle going like, "Hey guys, I went over here." I'm in between. I don't know where to go. See, I want to choose freedom, always. That's amazing. I want to be William Wallace, right? I want to have victory. I want to be brave. I want to be godly. I want to do all these things. This is the side I want, but I often find myself on this side. The side that I don't want to be on, and yet I still find myself there day after day and week after week. What do we do about this? When we have these two battles literally inside of ourselves, what do we do? How do we live freely in the Spirit instead of living in the flesh? And that's exactly what Paul is going to get to today. And in fact, the bottom line for today is maybe an oversimplification. But the bottom line is this, that when we feed the Spirit, the flesh will starve. When we feed the Spirit, the flesh will starve. So you can't do both at the same time. So it's like you either feed the flesh and the Spirit's going to starve, or you feed the Spirit and the flesh is going to starve. So let's dive into Galatians 5 today. That's where we're at. We're in the second part of Galatians 5. So the first part of Galatians 5, Paul says, hey, it's for freedom that Christ sets you free. And now in verse 13, he actually picks it back up again, the same concept. He says this in verse 13. He says, you, my brothers and sisters, you were called to be free. But do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. You see, if you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. Friends, you were called to be free. And what Paul says back in the beginning of chapter 5, he says, you were called to be free, so walk in freedom. Use that freedom for good. He doesn't say use the freedom to take care of yourself, to indulge the flesh. He says the opposite. Don't use your freedom to indulge the flesh. See, freedom is not just freedom to choose. It's a freedom actually that leads us towards love. True freedom comes through love and it results in love. This is what we saw last week at Easter. Freedom that Jesus gave us, the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. We saw on the cross the ultimate symbol of free choice. You see, Jesus chose to go to the cross. He wasn't forced, he didn't have to, but he chose it out of love. The freedom that Jesus had to choose was not for himself, it was for us. You see, Jesus chose difficulty and pain and eventually death because he knew it's what we needed, not what he wanted. And so it's the same for us. We actually, because of the sacrificial love of Jesus, we now have the ability to walk in freedom. But it's not a freedom just to take care of myself, be like, oh, great, I can do whatever I want. It's like, no, the freedom is actually for the benefit of other people. That's what godly freedom looks like. We are actually compelled by Christ's love, not condemned by Christ's love. You see, when I look at the cross, I don't look at the cross and think, oh, Jesus died on the cross, and so therefore I can now just go do whatever I want, because he paid it all, so I'm good. This is what Paul's directly arguing against. He's like, that's not it at all. In fact, when you look at the cross, you should be compelled by his love to love other people, right? To use the freedom that he's gained for you for love. I love how Leon Morris says it this way. He says, we know love in the New Testament sense only because we see it in the cross. And to see this love is to be affected by it. You see, when we have received the kind of love that Jesus has given us and shown us on the cross, we can't help but be changed on the inside. And the freedom that we've received is not just to take care of ourselves, but it's actually to extend that love to the world. When we receive love, our natural response to be to respond in love to the world. And so this is what Paul is urging his people to do. He says, Galatians, you have received the love of God, the sacrificial love. You have freedom now. Don't indulge the flesh. And then in verse 15, he kind of puts this is what the result looks like, sort of a statement. He says, if you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. You see, he's addressing right here, he's saying, if you go and you say, all right, I'm going to choose this faction and this faction, because if you remember culturally in Galatians, they were having these different discussions around, okay, circumcision and rights and all the things like eating and what's clean and what's unclean. And they were putting all these rules. And you can imagine having a bunch of factions in this church right now, right? Like the circumcised people, the people are like, you got to be circumcised in order to be a Christian. They're sitting over there. And these people over here saying, oh, you got to eat a certain way. And these people are like, no, we're totally free over here. And you have these pockets. And when you live in a disintegrated congregation, you're going to see disintegration. That's what is going to happen. That's what Paul is calling out here. But this isn't the kind of church that Jesus died on the cross for, right? This isn't what Jesus wanted for us. He says, no, the freedom that you've been given is not so that you can go back into slavery, it's so that you can walk in love together. You see, a church that's not displaying love for one another is a church that is not walking in freedom. If we were a church that I showed up every Sunday, I'd be like, oh man, these guys are fighting with these people, and these people aren't happy with these people. And that would be a challenge of saying, okay, are we actually walking in freedom? Or are we walking in our own what we want to do for ourselves again? It's a challenge to each of us. So if love is the beginning of freedom, then the question is, how do we actually walk in love? Right? Because that sounds great. Again, that war inside of me, I want to do this, but I'm actually doing this. How do I actually walk in love? Well, and it has to start with recognizing that there's a battle. There is a war for our freedom. And Paul outlines this in verse 16. He says, so I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They are in conflict with each other, so that you are not to do whatever you want. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Can you guys identify with that? Right? The flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. Inside of ourselves, there is a battle going on all the time. What do we do about that? And Paul kind of outlines the battle. We talked about the Spirit, we talked about the flesh, but I want to help you guys understand what flesh means just a little bit. So the word flesh in here is the word sarx, S-A-R-X. And what it means is just the human body. It's literally just who we are. It's not that flesh is evil, but the flesh is actually a body apart from the influence of God. It's the natural body that we were created in, but because of the fall, it's a body that is prone to sin and decay. Paul's not saying your flesh, your body is bad. He's saying what the flesh leads to when you appease the flesh, that is where you can get in trouble. The flesh really is human nature apart from the divine influence. So when we walk in the flesh, we're essentially putting aside God and saying, I'm just going to do whatever my body tells me to, right? Whatever I want to do, whatever feels good, that's what I'm going to do. And this is how many of us feel kind of the influence of the flesh. It's not so much like, all right, I just want to do all the bad things I know I shouldn't do, and that's me, and I'm good, and then don't worry about it. What the flesh actually tends to do is it actually is just the natural order of things without God's influence. So you know what the word entropy means? Right? When things just go from order to chaos, right? Or inertia, it's where things that are at rest will stay at rest. It's the same idea with the flesh, that when we live in the flesh, we are experiencing entropy away from God. It's when we live in the flesh, we're experiencing an inertia that doesn't lead us towards God. It actually leads us away from God. It's like, oh, it's just kind of the natural way things are going to go without God's influence in our lives. So when we appease the flesh, it's not so much always like, oh, I'm just doing all these things wrong. It's like, I just don't want to try anymore. It's easier to just let it go. What's the path of least resistance? And that's really where the flesh gets us. And today, if you find yourself floating, maybe in your life or in your spiritual life, you know where it's going to end up. It's going to end up not closer to God, but further away from God. That's just the natural end of the flesh. And I resonate with this personally, right? I in my own life, I'm like, I want to be spiritual. I want to be close to God, but it's a lot easier to just not try, honestly. But where do I end up? I don't end up closer to God. I end up where I don't want to be. And sometimes it takes me down paths that I'm like, I'm way further away from God than I thought I was, right? Because the flesh will lead us away where the Spirit will lead us towards. And the tension that we live in every minute is what Paul's saying. You're saying the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit. They can't live in unity together. And sometimes in my life, I try to reconcile, be like, well, I can kind of have this and kind of have the Spirit too, you know? I can have both. It doesn't work that way, right? When I'm feeding the flesh, the Spirit is dying. When I'm feeding the Spirit, the flesh will die. And then Paul gets really obvious with this. It's as if he's like, you don't understand what the flesh is. Let me explain it to you. Let me just point it out. This is where it leads. Verse 19. He says, the acts of the flesh, they're obvious. Sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God. And right here, I'm like, well, duh, Paul. Like, it's so, like, these are so obvious. It's like if I looked at any of these things, or you looked at me and you're like, Jonathan, is any of this in your life? Maybe that's not very godly. It's so obvious. I love that Paul has to outline it for everybody, but it's like, no, this is obvious. But what's not obvious is that as we live in these ways according to the flesh, what's not obvious is how much it's hurting ourselves and how much it's actually hurting others. Right? Many of these things that he lists in here, they're not just personal problems, they're problems that affect community. Things like dissension, debauchery, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage. See, these things, these disrupt and break up unity within a church, within a family, within a friendship. Right? When we live according to the flesh, we end up hurting ourselves, we end up hurting others. This is just common. We know this. This isn't like rocket science. This isn't like, what, I've never heard this before. Of course. We know this is how it goes. So the question for yourself is today, okay, I want to live by the Spirit, but sometimes I live by the flesh. How do I do a good audit? Well, it might be good to go back to that list and be like, is there anything in that list that I'm kind of like, oh yeah, that's in me? Because I guarantee you there is something for each of us in that list. Right? Things like, do I have more rage than I thought I did? Are there moments when all of a sudden, like, the things that I thought I had buried deep come right back up again? Have I been talking bad about people again? I don't want to, but is that coming up? Is that coming out of me? Am I undermining unity? Am I being envious when I see other people thriving and I'm not? You see, these are things that are going to be telltale signs of you might be living in the flesh instead of living in the Spirit. And every day we have to do this. In fact, every moment it might be good to be like, all right, where am I at right now? Do an audit. Because I would say for none of us, you're not going to look at this list and be like, there's nothing in there for me. I'm good. I'm totally fine. It's like, no, for each one of us, we know there are things in our lives where we're still letting the flesh win. That's just the human nature. Or maybe you're finding yourself just disconnecting from reality, right? You're not like outwardly like hurting others, but you're like, I can't deal with this. And so you're running to addictions or substances or relationships or things you're like, if I could just numb that, put it to the side, then I'm going to be okay. See, that's the flesh that's winning. It's obvious. But it's also obvious not who we want to be. For any one of us, we don't want to be these types of people. So the question we need to ask ourselves is very simple. It's this: am I living in freedom? Because the other thing that Paul is talking about with the flesh is the flesh represents slavery again. The flesh is not freedom. You think it's freedom, right? Sometimes it's like, oh, I have freedom to choose. I can do whatever I want. It's like, yeah, that's free, but is that really freedom? Because if you look at where it's leading you, do you feel more free? Do you feel more happy? Do you feel more like, yeah, I'm living my best? No. You actually are more in slavery. It's the fruit of the flesh that puts you back in slavery. So Paul outlines that. He says that's very obvious. Now, what does it look like to live in the Spirit? And this is where I love this, because he moves to the other side. He's like, this is what it looks like. And this is actually one of the most famous passages in the Bible. This is the fruit of the Spirit, if you've ever heard of it. Galatians 5:22. He says the fruit of the Spirit, in contrast to the flesh, is this. It's love. It's joy. It's peace. It's forbearance. It's kindness. It's goodness. It's faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And against such things, there is no law. What he's saying is that when you live in these ways, this is a law of itself. This is the law of God, is to experience the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, etc. So he essentially sets up two things. He says, you've got two trees in your life. You've got a tree of the flesh, and you've got a tree of the Spirit. And if you want to know which one you're living in at any given moment, look at what? Look at the fruit. Right? I'm not a I can't even say the word right. Horticulturist. I don't know much about fruits, but I do know that if I have an apple tree, I'm going to get apples from that apple tree. If I have an orange tree, I'm going to get what? Oranges from the orange tree. It's obvious. It's a no doubt. But what the problem is often like we look at a tree, this is just metaphorically now, we look at a tree and we say, I don't like what fruit that tree is producing. I really like that tree, but I have this tree. So I'm going to go over here, I'm going to pick an orange out, and I'm going to try to just glue it onto the apple tree. Cool. See, now I have an orange tree, right? There's oranges. Like oranges are on it, so therefore it must be an orange tree, isn't it? No, what if I did the same? I just grabbed this apple and I want to put it on the orange tree. It's an apple tree now, right? Well, no, of course not. That's not how it works. It's like whatever tree you have is the kind of fruit you're going to be getting. And so what Paul is saying is here, you can identify what tree is growing in your life at any given moment by looking at the fruit that's coming from your life. If there's good fruit, it's a good tree. If there's not great fruit, it's not a great tree. We do this in our lives all of the time. I say things like, I want to be more loving. I pick up love and I put it on my tree. Look, I'm more loving. But then all of a sudden it falls off. And I'm like, ah, dang it. We pick up another one. I try it again. It falls off. And I try again. I try again. What's the problem? I'm not growing the right tree. See, the problem isn't that I'm not trying to be better. It's not that I don't want to have more love and more patience or more peace or any of the fruit of the Spirit. It's not that I don't want to have those things. It's more that I don't know how to get those things other than just trying to put them onto my tree. But what the invitation is that when we live by the Spirit, we will actually see the fruit come out of us, not come from the outside and put on us. And this happens all the time. I don't know about you guys, but I show up to church sometimes and I've had a really bad day. I know you can never tell, Sometimes I've had a really bad day or a really bad morning or a moment. Maybe it's a bad week or a bad month. And sometimes I come and I'm like, ooh, okay, I got to put on the good fruit today. Got to be patient and loving and kind. And then I get home and I'm just like, I can't do it anymore. I can't just put on the fruit that I want. It doesn't work like that. The fruit comes from within. See, the fruit tells you what tree is growing in you. I had a neighbor a few years ago who actually told me about a tree that would come and it would try to take over other plants in our garden and like in our property. He'd be like, oh yeah, that tree, it'll literally come into the other tree and grow inside of it and then like kind of overtake that tree and become a different tree. And I was like, that is such a perfect analogy for my heart, right? Where I think I'm growing one thing, but there's another tree growing right alongside of it. And so there's two ways to deal with it. One is you can just let it overtake it and say, well, I guess this is the tree I have now. Or you can actively cut that tree out and you can foster the good tree. Right? And that's what our hearts are like. We need to cut out the bad species of tree, the thing that's invasive, but at the same time, we have to foster and cultivate the good tree. It's the same thing what Paul's saying here is you got to feed the Spirit and the flesh will end up starving. So what's going to happen? And what he goes on to say then is not just that it's not just a war thing that we're saying, okay, we're hopelessly lost. No. See, the war has been won by Jesus, but the battle is constantly won through the Spirit. If you think about battles and wars, war is like the overall, like, okay, who won or lost this thing? Well, Jesus already won. The cross took care of it all. But I still have to go back and fight my battles every day against the flesh. Don't you? That's exactly what Paul is saying here. In verse 24, he says, those belong to Jesus Christ. They have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. But I feel like Paul, what I wish he had said, or what I think maybe even is what he's saying is, yes, you have, but you have to continue. Right? You have crucified the flesh, but you have to continue daily, every single day, to crucify the flesh. What we think will save us needs to be put to death. Life in the Spirit is where we're really truly going to find life. Say it again, when we feed the Spirit, the flesh will starve. Every single day, it's that examination. You see, when I was younger, before we had kids, I thought I was a very patient, loving, non-angry person, right? I was amazing. And then we had kids. And I became much more angry and much more impatient and much more about controlling my environment and my world than I ever thought. I was like, I'm a very patient, loving, it's a very natural thing. I just thought that was part of my personality, which it was. But personality can only get you so far, right? Ultimately, it has to be a work of the Spirit, because when I started getting rageful at my 3-month-old who wasn't sleeping through the night, that's not who I wanted to be. But that's the fruit that was coming out of my life. See, I hadn't cultivated it because I was just living on my natural instinct. I was like, oh, I'm naturally patient all the time until I'm sleep deprived, until I don't have a lot of food, until it's 2 a.m. and I can't control this thing that's living my life. Once I felt out of control, all of a sudden I realized I have a rage problem. I've got some anger. It's deep-seated in there. You don't see it often, but it comes out. Right? There are things in my life that as they come out, I realize I don't know that I'm fully cultivating what I thought I was cultivating. It's very simple what Paul's saying. What kind of fruit is in your life? What are you seeing? And it's not condemnation to be like, therefore you're not in Jesus because you're not living. It's like, no. It's like, because you're in Jesus, you should check out these things and maybe pay attention to what's going on. Because if you're feeding the beast and the flesh, you're not living by the Spirit. You're not feeding the Spirit. And then Paul says to the answer, how can I live a life by the Spirit? He makes it actually really simple in verse 25. He just says, since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. I love this phrase. If we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. You see, the Spirit is actively moving all of the time. And if we're in step with the Spirit is going in the right direction. It's like a train. If it's going by, it's like you get on the train, you're going to go that direction. That's just what happens. But maybe a better analogy is like walking your dog. So we have this little puppy. His name's George. He's amazing. And we walk them around the block once or twice a day, and we get him on the leash, and usually George is not right next to us. What's George doing? Because he's like a year old. What does he do? I gotta go over here. Oh, I gotta go over here. I gotta go over here. And like the whole time I'm literally doing this, like he's pulling me, and he's tiny. Like he's got this energy about him because he's trying to explore everything. But I have to keep him on a leash because he doesn't know what's good for him. Right? I'm like, George, no, get over here. No, can't eat that. And I'm constantly doing this. But this past week, we're trying to get him off the leash a little bit to be like, all right, you can go a few houses down on your own, and trying to help him understand, hey, listen to our voice. Hey, George, we're here. You're over there. Hey, stop. Come here. Hey, stop. And all of a sudden, we're starting to see where George's boundaries are. George doesn't have great boundaries, by the way. He's not very good at listening yet. He'll get there. But that analogy to me is me with God. God is walking at a consistent pace all of the time. He's going one direction. And you know what Jonathan's doing? What's going on over here? What's going on over here? Hey, what's going on over here? Like I'm constantly all over the place. And who doesn't change? God. Who's changing all the time? Me. You see, when he says walk by the Spirit, he's literally like walk in step with the Spirit. If the Spirit's going one direction and I'm going a different direction, then that's on me to say, okay, where do I go? I need to go back and say, God, where are you moving? Where are you walking? Because I don't think I'm walking with you. Sometimes we're like, no, God's got to like change for me. God's got to fit my lifestyle. God's got to fit where I want to go, what I want to do. It doesn't work like that. You see, freedom, as much as it seems counterintuitive, is actually walking in step with the Spirit. Because the Spirit is going where I want to be. See, I want to have fruit like love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and all of these things. But when I don't keep in step with the Spirit, I'm going wherever I want, but it doesn't actually get me what I think it's going to get me. So it takes a desire to actually walk with the Spirit. Sometimes we say the Christian life, it's not about trying, right? It's just about receiving grace. I 100% agree and preach that every single week. But there is a sense of you have to desire to want to follow God. And if you don't have that desire, it's not on you to just be like, let me just try harder. I got to pull myself up by my bootstraps and just get it done. Instead, God says, bring that to me too. Even your lack of desire is something that God can transform. And so if you're looking in your life today and you're saying, I feel like I'm living in the flesh, I'm not living in the Spirit, I don't know what to do, start by taking it to God. And say, God, I don't even have a desire today to walk by your Spirit. Would you grow that in me? And the thing is, guys, he will. God is faithful. He will do it. The thing is that Paul's trying so hard to get the Galatians to understand, guys, it's not about your own effort, because when it is, you keep going back into law, you keep going back into boundaries and rules and trying to just make your life work. It's not about that. It's about the power of God working in you. In fact, in Philippians 2, he says this. He says, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. That's the you part. Continue to work it out. Then he says this in verse 13. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill what? His good purpose. You see, God's purposes are greater than yours. And when you come to God, God's power is not just so that you can be empowered, it's so that he can actually work in and through you in this world. So if you find yourself today, you're like, I've got these two trees and I just keep trying to glue on the good fruit to the bad tree. Say, God, I don't know what to do with this. And bring it to him. And he's going to work. And he's not just going to do it in you, he actually does it in community as well. This is why we talked about in announcements, getting into community, finding a group, coming to connect with friends, meeting people that you can do this life with. Because when you try to do it on your own, it's so much harder. You're not on your own, God's with you, but if you're isolated out there, it becomes so much harder to live by the Spirit. And in fact, Paul talks about this. We're going to jump to chapter 6 and just hit a couple verses here. But in chapter 6, he talks about how do we help each other in this. Chapter 6, verse 1, he says, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you fulfill the law of Christ. Sometimes we use this passage to be like, oh man, I caught that person. They were doing something wrong, and I called them out on it. Yeah. But he doesn't say, talk to that person and get them in trouble. What does he say? He says, if they're caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit, you should restore that person gently. Why? Well, not because you're better than them, but because you might actually be caught in the same thing next day. Right? There's a sense of none of us is better than the other. If you've heard Jesus talk about the speck in your eye and the log in your brother's eye, or vice versa, it's like if you have a log in your eye, there's no way you can help get a speck out of your brother's eye. If you got a splinter, you got to take care of yourself first. It's like the same idea that God has given us a community to help one another in humility. And this is how we do it. So today, if you're sitting here and you're like, I don't know how I walk by the Spirit, first thing to start with is talk to somebody. Is just say, how do I do this? Can you pray for me? I need God's Spirit more. I need less of this. I don't know how to do this. Could you help me? Could you pray for me? Because God's given us a community to encourage each other, to inspire each other, to empower each other, to engage each other, to help each other walk in the Spirit. That's the thing. That's the whole context again of Galatians. Paul's talking about, hey, as a community, walk by the Spirit. He's not saying individually only, but as a community, help each other walk by the Spirit. And imagine if we, as a community, were living as people who inspired each other to walk by the Spirit every day. That if you showed up to your life group and you're sharing something, that the group doesn't just say, oh man, that's really tough, or oh, I'm so sorry, or oh man, you gotta work on that. Instead, they come around you and they pray with you and say, what can we do for you? How can we help you? You know, we've had these moments in my life group where people have shared things and it's like, wow, that is incredibly vulnerable. But you felt safe enough to share it here? And we could help each other get more and more closer to God's Spirit by encouragement, by prayer, by accountability, by being with one another in community. Community is so important, and you're not alone. Paul, as he ends this section, we're going to end it at verse 8, start of verse 7. He just reminds us this. He says, hey guys, don't be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Whoever sows to please their flesh, from the flesh will reap destruction. Whoever sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. He's kind of surmising all that he's said so far about the Spirit and the flesh. He's like, listen, we know. When we sow to make that tree grow of flesh, it's only going to produce bad fruit. But when we sow for the Spirit, we're going to produce spiritual fruit. And today, guys, as we close, I just want to remind you, it's not something you can do on your own. It's not something you can do on your own willpower. If you're like, I'm just going to try harder, I'm going to set a goal, and I'm going to hit it. Those are good things, but without the Spirit of God, without the resurrection power of Jesus in your life, you will never overcome the flesh. And so today, if you're finding yourself feeling like, I actually feel a little discouraged by that, just remember, every single one of us is in this battle together. You're not alone. Your fight against the flesh, whatever it is for you, it's not something that you have to do on your own. You have people in your life, and ultimately you have the power of God available to you right now. It's not like, oh yeah, in a couple months, or if I just did something more, or if I become more spiritual. No, God's available right now for you. And so as we close, I'm going to actually ask the band to come up. And we're going to end with prayer. And as we go through this last song, if there's something in you that you're just like, man, I'm fighting this battle, or I don't even know what to do with my life, we want to pray for you too. And so during this last worship song, if you would like to receive prayer, we're going to have people for prayer right over here to my right, your left. Just to sit with you, to pray, to say, hey, how can we support you? Today, I just want us to close our eyes, to bow our heads. And I'm not unaware right now that there is a battle for our souls. That for some of us, we don't even want to think about it or talk about it. But today, maybe God's just gently knocking, or maybe he's banging on the heart. And he's saying, hey, you've got to look at some of this stuff. That fruit that's in your life, what's it pointing to? And if we want to live as people who are free in the Spirit, we have to learn to feed the Spirit. So God, I just pray, Lord, that each one of us, as we learn to live in your Spirit, to walk in your Spirit minute by minute, Lord, would we become a community of people who are empowered, who are full of love and kindness and goodness and gentleness and all of the things that are the fruit of the Spirit. It's not just one thing, it's all of it together. And God, I'm so grateful. Grateful that you've given us a community. That for each one of us, we don't have to do this on our own. So God, I pray right now that we would be encouraged, that we would learn to walk in your Spirit, and God, that we would see the fruit and the result of walking in the Spirit, that we would see our community transformed, our world transformed, our families transformed. God, that as you transform us from the inside out, would you transform the world around us? Jesus, we pray these things in your powerful, saving name. Amen.
Church, can we stand together and just sing?